The holographic display flickered, showing a planet covered in dark green forests that seemed to move even when there was no wind. Ambassador Krell's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he watched the human delegates study the deadly world before them. The meeting room aboard the orbital station smelled of recycled air and fear. "This is Verdant 7, Krell announced to the gathered representatives from 12 different species. "We have lost 47 explorers to this world. The atmosphere burns through lung tissue in minutes. The plants leak acid that melts our strongest armor. The creatures hunt in packs and show no fear of technology." Tom Rivers sat quietly in his chair, much smaller than the other delegates around the curved table. His brown hair was messy, and he wore simple clothes that looked cheap compared to the fancy uniforms and biosuits of the other species. The Altarian delegate, whose blue skin shimmered with natural oils, leaned away from Tom as if the human might carry some disease. "The survey data shows mineral deposits worth trillions of credits," Krell continued. "Rare elements that could power our ships for generations, but we cannot reach them. Every team we send dies within hours." The Drakmor representative, built like a walking tank with thick gray skin and tusks, slammed a massive fist on the table. "My warriors are the strongest in the galaxy. We survived the hell wars of Sector 9, but this place killed my best soldiers like they were younglings." Tom finally spoke up. "What exactly killed them?" The room went quiet. Tom's voice was calm and curious, not afraid like everyone expected. Krell pressed a button and the hologram changed to show medical scans. "The atmospheric toxins attacked their breathing systems. Their equipment failed when the plant acids ate through the protective seals. The predators coordinate their attacks better than any military unit we have seen." "Show me the atmospheric analysis," Tom said. The blue Altarian delegate made a sound like a wheeze. "Human, do you not understand? This world kills everything that touches it. We have tried sending our best scientists, our strongest warriors, our most advanced machines. Nothing survives." Tom was reading the data on his small tablet device. The other species used complex computer systems built into their bodies or their suits, but humans still carried simple tools. "These toxin levels, they're actually not that bad." Every creature in the room turned to stare at Tom. "Ambassador." Krell's translator device made a scratching sound as it tried to process what the human had said. "Not that bad." The Drakmor warrior's voice boomed across the room. "These compounds would melt your soft human skin in seconds." Tom shrugged. "Maybe, but humans evolved on a pretty rough planet. We dealt with volcanic gases, poisonous plants, deadly bacteria, and aggressive predators for millions of years. Our bodies learned to handle things that would kill most species." The hologram switched to show footage from the last failed mission. Armored figures moved through thick forest undergrowth before their equipment began sparking and failing. Dark shapes moved between the trees surrounding the team. The footage cut out when screaming started. "You see?" Krell pointed at the frozen image. "The forest itself fights back. The creatures show intelligence beyond anything we have encountered. They use the toxic environment as a weapon." Tom studied the footage frame by frame. "Those aren't attack patterns. Look at how they move. They're protecting something. Probably young ones nearby." He pointed at the screen. "And see how the plants are arranged? This isn't random. There's an ecosystem here that actually works together." The other delegates exchanged glances. Their translation devices were working, but they could not understand how the human was seeing. Opportunity where they saw only death. "Human Rivers," the Altarian delegate said slowly. "Are you suggesting that your species could survive where ours cannot?" Tom was quiet for a long moment, still studying the data. The room waited. Outside the viewing ports, Verdant 7 rotated slowly, its green surface looking peaceful from orbit. "I think so," Tom said finally, "but I would need to go alone." The Drakmor warrior laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Alone? Our teams," Had 20 members with the best equipment in the galaxy. That might have been the problem, Tom replied. Large groups make noise, smell different, seem threatening. If these creatures are as smart as you say, they probably saw your teams as invaders. One person might not trigger the same response. Ambassador. Krell's eyes blinked again, this time not in sequence. It was a sign of confusion among his people. What equipment would you need? We can provide anything our technology can create. Tom smiled, and the expression seemed strange to the other species. Humans showed teeth when happy, which most creatures interpreted as a threat display. Just basic camping gear, food for a few days, some simple tools, maybe a first aid kit. That is all? The Altarian delegate's skin color shifted to a darker blue, indicating shock. If I'm right about this place, bringing too much technology will just make me a target. I need to work with the environment, not fight against it. The room fell silent again. The representatives looked at each other, communicating through subtle body language and chemical signals that humans could not detect. Finally, Ambassador Krell spoke. The Council has already invested significant resources in this world. If you fail, we lose only one human. If you succeed, he paused. If you succeed, you prove that your species has value beyond what we expected. Tom stood up from his chair. Even standing, he was shorter than most of the seated delegates. When do I leave? The Drakmor warrior studied Tom with new interest. You show no fear. That is unusual for such a small creature. I'm not small, where I come from, Tom said, and fear doesn't help when you're trying to survive. Curiosity and adaptation do. Ambassador Krell activated his communication device. Prepare a shuttle for human rivers. Basic supplies only, as requested. He looked back at Tom. We will monitor from orbit. If you require emergency extraction, I'll let you know, Tom interrupted. But give me at least 2 weeks before you assume I'm dead. Humans take time to adapt to new environments. As the meeting ended and the delegates filed out, Tom remained behind, studying the holographic display of Verdant 7. The planet's surface showed no signs of cities or technology, just endless green forests that moved in the wind. Somewhere down there were creatures that had killed the galaxy's best soldiers and scientists, plants that could dissolve advanced armor, an atmosphere that burned alien lungs. Tom smiled again as he watched the world rotate. It looked beautiful. Tom felt the shuttle's engines cut off as the small craft settled onto a clearing at the forest's edge. Through the reinforced windows, he could see thick trees that looked almost black in the alien sunlight. Steam rose from the ground where the shuttle's heat had touched wet leaves. The pilot, a nervous Keth with gray skin and 6 arms, kept checking his instruments. Atmosphere shows safe for your breathing apparatus, the pilot said, his voice shaking. Slightly. But the toxin readings are climbing fast. Your species has maybe 10 minutes before lung damage begins. Tom was already putting on his simple backpack and checking his basic equipment. He had a water bottle, some earth food bars, a small knife, a basic first aid kit, and a sleeping bag. Everything fit in one pack that looked tiny compared to the massive gear the previous teams had carried. Thanks for the ride, Tom said as he moved toward the shuttle door. Wait! The pilot grabbed Tom's arm with 2 of his hands. I should stay, monitor your condition, extract you when the poisoning starts. Tom gently pulled free. If I'm right about this, having a shuttle here will just scare the local wildlife. Come back in 3 days. If I'm not here, look for me deeper in the forest. The pilot made a clicking sound that his translator turned into worried muttering, but he opened the shuttle door. The moment it cracked open, Tom smelled the forest. It was thick and green and alive, like Earth's rainforests, but with a sharp edge that made his nose tingle. The air felt warm and heavy. Tom stepped out and the shuttle door sealed behind him immediately. He heard the engines spin up as the pilot prepared to leave quickly. Tom did not blame him. The readings from previous missions showed that even being near this place was dangerous for most species. The shuttle lifted off, and Tom was alone. The first breath of forest air made his lungs burn slightly. It felt like inhaling near a campfire when the wind shifted wrong. Tom had expected this. Humans had lived near volcanoes, in swamps full of poisonous gases, and in cities with terrible air pollution. His body would adapt, or it would not. Either way, panicking would not help. Tom walked toward the tree line, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible. If there were creatures watching him, he wanted to seem calm and non-threatening. The previous military teams had come in with weapons ready and armor active. Tom carried only a small knife, and he kept it put away. The trees were taller than Earth trees, with thick trunks covered in what looked like smooth bark. But when Tom got closer, he could see that the bark was actually moving slightly, like it was breathing. Clear fluid dripped from some of the branches. This was the acid that had eaten through the other team's equipment. Tom found a stick and dipped it in a small puddle of the clear fluid. The wood started to smoke and dissolve. Definitely acid. But Tom had grown up near hot springs where the water could burn skin. He had worked in labs with chemicals that could melt metal. The key was not to avoid the danger, but to understand it. He found a leaf that had fallen from one of the trees and wrapped it around the stick. The leaf did not dissolve, so the trees made acid but protected themselves from it. Tom collected several of these leaves and used them to handle other things safely. As he moved deeper into the forest, Tom noticed that his breathing was getting easier, not harder. The burning sensation in his lungs had faded to a mild irritation. His body was already adapting to the atmospheric toxins. Humans were very good at adapting quickly. The forest was full of sounds, clicking noises from the trees, soft calls from hidden creatures, the drip of acid and the rustle of leaves. But it did not sound threatening. It sounded alive and busy, like any healthy ecosystem. Tom found a stream of clear water running through the forest. His scanner showed it was full of compounds that would kill most galactic species, but to Tom it just tasted slightly metallic, like well water from deep underground. He drank carefully at first, then more as his stomach accepted it without problems. By the end of his first day, Tom had made several discoveries. The acid-producing trees only leaked their defensive chemicals when they detected certain pheromones, probably from the other galactic species. When Tom approached them, they barely produced any acid at all. The toxic atmosphere seemed to be mostly plant pollen and spores that human immune systems could process. The dangerous readings that had scared other species were just the forest's normal breathing. Tom set up his simple camp in a small clearing, using the acid-resistant leaves as ground cover and normal branches for a basic shelter. As darkness fell, he could hear larger creatures moving through the trees, but they stayed at a distance. They were curious about him, but not aggressive. On the second day, Tom found fruits growing on some of the trees. They were bright orange and smelled sweet, but his scanner showed they contained several compounds listed as toxic to most known species. Tom tried a tiny piece first, then waited. His stomach handled it fine. He tried a larger piece. Still fine. By evening, he was eating the fruits regularly. They tasted like a cross between earth oranges and mangoes. The creatures were getting bolder. Tom caught glimpses of them between the trees. They looked like wolves, but with 6 legs and patches on their skin that glowed softly in the dark. They had spines along their backs that could extend or retract. The previous teams had reported that these spines contained deadly poison. Tom found tracks in the soft ground near his camp. The creatures had been close while he slept, probably watching him, but they had not attacked. They were being careful, just like he was. On the third day, Tom heard sounds of fighting deeper in the forest, growls and sharp cries. He followed the sounds carefully, moving quietly through the trees. He found a group of the 6-legged creatures, surrounding a larger predator that looked like a giant lizard with too many teeth. The wolf-like creatures were protecting something. Tom climbed a tree to get a better view. Behind the pack, in a hollow between some roots, he could see small shapes. Babies. The pack was defending their young against the giant lizard. The lizard was winning. It was bigger and stronger, and two of the wolf creatures were already injured. Tom watched one of the injured animals drag itself away from the fight, leaving a trail of green blood. Tom climbed down from the tree. His human brain told him to stay out of it. This was not his fight, but another part of his brain, the part that had evolved alongside pack animals for thousands of years, told him something different. He picked up a large rock and threw it at the giant lizard. It hit the creature on the side of the head, and the lizard turned to look at him with yellow eyes full of rage. Tom yelled and waved his arms, trying to look bigger and more threatening than he actually was. The wolf pack stopped fighting, stared at Tom. The giant lizard hesitated, confused by this new small creature that was acting aggressive despite being obviously weak. Tom threw another rock, this one hitting the lizard on the nose. The creature roared and started moving toward Tom. Tom ran, leading the lizard away from the pack and their babies. Behind him, he could hear the wolf creatures making new sounds, not growls or cries, but something that sounded almost like talking. Tom led the giant lizard on a chase through the forest until the creature got tired and gave up. When Tom made his way back to where the fight had been, he found one of the injured wolf creatures lying near the stream. It was breathing hard and green. Blood was leaking from claw marks on its side. Tom approached slowly, making soft sounds like he would with an injured dog. The creature watched him, but did not try to run or attack. Tom used water from the stream and clean leaves to wash the wounds. The creature's skin was warm and the glowing patches felt smooth under his hands. As Tom worked, more of the pack emerged from the forest. They surrounded him and the injured pack member, but they did not seem threatening. They watched with intelligent eyes as Tom used his first aid kit to treat the wounds as best he could. When Tom finished, the injured creature made a soft sound and touched Tom's hand with its nose. The gesture was so similar to a dog showing gratitude that Tom smiled. The pack leader, a large creature with especially bright glowing patches, approached Tom slowly. It sniffed at him carefully, then made a rumbling sound that did not seem aggressive. Tom held still as the creature investigated him. Finally, the pack leader did something that surprised Tom. It lay down near him and closed its eyes. In pack animal behavior, this was a sign of trust. The leader was showing that it did not see Tom as a threat. Soon, the other pack members were lying down too. Tom found himself in the middle of a group of sleeping creatures that were supposed to be deadly predators. Their soft breathing and the gentle glow of their skin patches made the forest feel peaceful instead of dangerous. Tom realized that the shuttle pilot would be coming back soon to check on him. But Tom was not ready to leave yet. He was starting to understand this place, and these creatures were starting to understand him. He had found something remarkable in this toxic forest, not just resources or scientific discoveries, but the beginning of friendship with an entirely new species. The other galactic races had seen only danger here because they had approached with fear and weapons. Tom had approached with curiosity and open hands, and the forest was welcoming him home. The morning light filtered through the forest canopy differently than Earth sunlight, casting everything in shades of green and gold. Tom woke up surrounded by 6 sleeping creatures that purred softly as they breathed. Their bioluminescent patches had dimmed during the night but still glowed like tiny stars. The pack leader opened one large eye and looked at Tom, then closed it again with a contented rumble. Tom had been in the forest for 8 days now. The shuttle pilot had returned on the 3rd day as promised, circling overhead and sending radio signals. Tom had waved to show he was alive but had not returned to the landing site. The pilot had left food drops and medical supplies, then departed with obvious reluctance. Tom's body had fully adapted to the forest environment. The atmospheric toxins no longer bothered him at all. His skin had developed a slight resistance to the plant acids. Most importantly, his digestive system had learned to process the local foods. He had gained weight and felt healthier than he had in years. The creatures he had started calling spike wolves had accepted him into their pack structure, not as a leader, but as something unique. They seemed to understand that he was different from them, but valuable in his own way. Tom brought new ideas to their hunting strategies and showed them how to use tools like rocks and sticks. In return, they protected him and shared their knowledge of the forest. On this morning, Tom followed the pack to a new area of the forest where the trees were even larger and the canopy blocked out most of the sunlight. The spike wolves were acting nervous, making low whining sounds and staying close together. Their spines were extended slightly, ready for danger. Tom soon discovered why. In a clearing ahead, he found a scene that made his heart ache. 3 young spike wolves lay motionless on the ground, their glowing patches dim and flickering. They were barely alive. Around them, the ground was torn up from fighting, and there were traces of blood from multiple creatures. The pack leader approached the injured youngsters and made soft crying sounds. The other adults circled the clearing, looking for threats but also mourning. Tom realized what had happened. This was another pack's territory, and there had been a fight. These juveniles had been left behind when their pack retreated. Tom knelt, down next to the closest injured youngling. It was smaller than the adults, with shorter spines and patches that glowed in soft blues and purples instead of the adults' green and gold. The creature was unconscious and breathing weakly. Tom could see bite wounds on its legs and a deep gash along its side. The pack leader of Tom's adopted family approached slowly. It sniffed at the injured juveniles and made questioning sounds. Tom understood. The pack leader was asking if Tom could help, like he had helped the injured adult before. Tom opened his medical kit and began to work. Human first aid supplies were basic compared to advanced galactic medical technology. But Tom had learned wilderness medicine during his years on Earth. Clean the wounds, stop the bleeding, prevent infection, keep the patient warm and hydrated. As Tom worked on the first juvenile, something unexpected happened. The creature's defensive toxin system, which should have activated when touched by an alien species, remained completely inactive. Tom's human skin chemistry somehow neutralized the spike wolves' chemical sensors. They could not detect him as a threat at the biological level. Tom cleaned and bandaged the wounds on all 3 juveniles. He used his water supply to keep them hydrated and his sleeping bag to keep them warm. The pack watched with intense interest. As Tom worked, occasionally bringing him things they thought might be useful, like healing plants or clean moss. As the day progressed, the injured youngsters began to recover. The smallest one opened its eyes first and looked directly at Tom. Instead of fear, Tom saw curiosity in those large, intelligent eyes. The juvenile made a soft, chirping sound and tried to stand up. Tom helped the young creature to its feet, supporting its weight until it could balance on its 6 legs. The juvenile sniffed at Tom with the same careful attention the adults had shown, then did something remarkable. It pressed its head against Tom's chest and purred. The pack leader watched this, interaction with what Tom could only describe as approval. The other adults began approaching the recovering juveniles, greeting them with gentle touches and soft vocalizations. But they also included Tom in these greetings, treating him as part of the family unit. Over the next few days, Tom found himself becoming a caretaker for the 3 young spike wolves. They followed him everywhere, learning from him just as they learned from the adult pack members. Tom taught them simple games and showed them how to use tools. They taught him their language of sounds and gestures. The youngest juvenile, the one who had greeted Tom first, became especially attached to him. Tom started thinking of the little creature as Glow because of how its patches flickered when it was excited. Glow would curl up against Tom when they slept and would cry if Tom moved too far away during the day. Tom also began to understand more about spike wolf intelligence. They were much smarter than anyone had realized. They had complex social structures, used primitive tools, and could plan ahead for future events. They even seemed to have a form of art, arranging rocks and branches in patterns that served no practical purpose but were clearly meaningful to them. Most importantly, the spike wolves were natural teachers and learners. They copied Tom's behaviors and adapted them to their own needs. When Tom showed them how to make simple traps for catching small prey, they improved on his designs. When Tom demonstrated how to process certain plants to make them more nutritious, they taught the technique to other pack members. The relationship was beneficial for both species. Tom learned which plants were safe to eat and which areas of the forest to avoid. The spike wolves learned new hunting techniques and tool use. Together, they were more successful than either species would have been alone. Tom also discovered that the forest's reputation for hostility was largely misunderstood. The previous galactic exploration teams had triggered defensive responses from both the plants and animals by approaching with large numbers, advanced technology, and aggressive postures. They had been seen as invaders. Tom's approach of coming, alone, with simple tools, and showing respect for the existing ecosystem had produced completely different results. The forest was not inherently hostile. It was protective. There was a difference. The spike wolves began bringing Tom gifts, shiny rocks, unusual plants, interesting pieces of wood. Tom realized these were offerings of friendship and acceptance. He started giving gifts in return, sharing his earth food with them and making simple toys from forest materials. One evening, as Tom sat by a small fire with the pack sleeping around him, he looked up at the stars through the forest canopy. Somewhere up there, the galactic observers were watching and waiting. They expected him to die in this toxic wasteland, or at best to barely survive until rescue. Instead, Tom had found a new family. He had found creatures that were intelligent, caring, and capable of forming bonds across species lines. He had found an ecosystem that could provide everything humans needed to thrive if they approached it with respect and understanding. The youngest spike wolf, Glow, stirred in sleep and moved closer to Tom's side. Its bioluminescent patches pulsed gently, in rhythm with its breathing like a living nightlight. Tom smiled and gently stroked the creature's smooth skin. Tom had come to this world as an explorer representing humanity to the Galactic Council. But he was realizing that his real mission might be something different. He might be here to prove that humans and other species could work together as partners instead of as conquerors or subjects. The spike wolves had lost their fear of him completely. They hunted with him, played with him, and protected him as one of their own. The juveniles saw him as a caretaker and teacher. The adults saw him as a valuable pack member with unique skills. Tom was beginning to think that when he finally returned to report to the Galactic Council, he would not be returning alone. The spike wolves were clearly intelligent enough for space travel and social enough to adapt to new environments. If they were willing, they could become humanity's first alien partners rather than subjects to be studied. But first, Tom needed to learn more about this world and these creatures. He needed to understand their culture, their needs, and their desires. He needed to become truly part of their society before he could invite them to become part of his. The forest around him hummed with life and contentment. Somewhere in the darkness, other packs were raising their own families and living their own lives. Tom had found just one small part of a much larger world. He closed his eyes and listened to the peaceful sounds of his adopted family sleeping around him. For the first time since leaving Earth, Tom felt completely at home. Tom had been living in the forest for 3 weeks when he realized he no longer thought of it as an alien world. The sounds of spike wolves calling to each other through the trees had become as familiar as birdsong. the smell of the phosphorescent flowers that bloomed at night was as comforting as any earth garden. This place had become home. His morning routine now included checking on a growing garden he had started in a natural clearing. Using techniques he had learned from both earth permaculture and spike wolf food gathering, Tom had begun cultivating the most nutritious local plants. The forest provided everything needed for a sustainable farming system: rich soil, natural fertilizers from decomposing plants, and a variety of species that worked together to create healthy growing conditions. The spike wolves had become enthusiastic partners in this project. They understood the concept of planting seeds for future food and had begun bringing Tom specimens from distant parts of the forest. Some of these plants had properties that Tom never would have discovered on his own. One purple root vegetable, when properly prepared, had more protein than Earth soybeans. Another leafy plant contained compounds that helped human muscles recover faster from exercise. Tom's pack had grown from the original 7 adults and 3 juveniles to nearly 20 individuals. Word had somehow spread through the spike wolf community that there was a safe place in the forest where injured or orphaned animals could find help. Tom had treated everything from infected wounds to broken bones to malnutrition. His simple first aid kit had been supplemented with natural medicines he learned to prepare from local plants. The most remarkable addition to their group was an elderly spike wolf that Tom had started calling Teacher. This ancient creature had arrived alone one morning, walking slowly and obviously in pain from arthritis in its joints. Tom had helped ease the old wolf's suffering with warm compresses and gentle massage, but more importantly, Teacher had begun sharing knowledge. Teacher knew the forest's history and secrets in ways that the younger wolves did not. Through a combination of gestures, sounds, and patient demonstration, Teacher showed Tom which plants could be used for medicine, which areas of the forest were dangerous during certain seasons, and how to read the complex social signals that spike wolves used to communicate across long distances. Under Teacher's guidance, Tom learned that the spike wolves had their own form of agriculture. They planted certain trees in specific patterns to create travel corridors through the forest. They managed the population of prey animals by hunting selectively. They even had methods for encouraging the growth of plants they found useful while discouraging harmful species. Tom realized that the untamed wilderness described in the Galactic Survey reports was actually a carefully managed ecosystem that had been maintained by intelligent creatures for generations. The spike wolves were not just predators living in a toxic forest. They were environmental engineers who had shaped their world to meet their needs. This discovery led Tom to his most ambitious project yet. Working with Teacher and the pack leaders, Tom began designing a permanent settlement that would work within the existing ecosystem rather than replacing it. Using human engineering concepts adapted for local materials, they created structures that complemented the forest's natural patterns. The main shelter was built around and within several large trees, using their living trunks as support pillars. The walls were woven from acid-resistant plant fibers and sealed with natural resins. The roof collected rainwater and channeled it into storage systems made from hollow logs. Waste disposal used composting methods that fed nutrients back into the forest soil. Most importantly, the settlement was designed to house both humans and spike wolves comfortably. There were spaces sized for human activities and spaces sized for spike wolf social behaviors. Shared areas allowed both species to interact and collaborate. Private areas allowed each species to maintain their own cultural practices. The spike wolves contributed engineering ideas that Tom would never have thought of on his own. They showed him how to use the bioluminescent organisms as living lighting systems. They demonstrated construction techniques that took advantage of the forest's natural growth patterns. They shared methods for preserving food that used the same chemical processes that made the forest seem toxic to other species. Tom's daily life had settled into patterns that combined human and spike wolf behaviors. He woke before dawn and spent the early morning hours tending his garden and checking on the settlement's various systems. Mid-morning was for hunting or gathering with different pack members, learning new areas of the forest and discovering new resources. Afternoons were often spent with teacher, learning spike wolf history and culture. Tom had begun to understand that the spike wolves had complex oral traditions passed down through generations of elders. They had myths and legends, moral codes, and social customs that were as sophisticated as any human culture. Evenings were for the entire pack to gather and share food, stories, and companionship. Tom had learned to prepare meals that both humans and spike wolves could enjoy. Many of the forest's plants, when properly cooked, were delicious to both species. The spike wolves had introduced Tom to hunting techniques that provided fresh meat, without disrupting the forest's ecological balance. During these evening gatherings, Tom had begun teaching human concepts to the spike wolves. He showed them basic mathematics using stones and sticks. He demonstrated human games and sports that the spike wolves adapted into their own play behaviors. He shared human stories and legends, which the spike wolves seemed to understand and appreciate even across species barriers. The young spike wolves, especially Glow and the other two juveniles Tom had rescued, had become remarkably skilled at bridging the gap between human and spike wolf communication. They seemed to instinctively understand both languages and often served as translators when Tom and the adult wolves were trying to share complex ideas. Glow had developed an especially close bond with Tom. The young spike wolf had learned to use human tools and even showed interest in human activities like writing. Tom had started teaching Glow to recognize human symbols and numbers and was amazed at how quickly the young creature learned. One evening, as Tom was updating his journal by the light of bioluminescent fungi, Glow approached with a piece of bark that had symbols scratched into it. Tom looked more closely and realized that Glow had been trying to copy human writing. The symbols were crude but recognizable attempts at letters and numbers. Tom spent the rest of the evening teaching Glow more about human writing systems. By the end of the night, Glow could write its own name using human letters and could recognize several common human words. Tom realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. He was teaching an alien species to read and write. As the weeks passed, Tom's health continued to improve. The forest's nutrition and the active lifestyle had made him stronger and more energetic than he had been in years. His immune system had adapted so completely to the local environment that he could eat raw plants that would have been deadly to him when he first arrived. His skin had developed a natural resistance to most of the forest's chemical hazards. More importantly, Tom's understanding of the forest ecosystem had reached a level where he could predict weather patterns, seasonal changes, and animal behaviors with remarkable accuracy. He had become as skilled a woodsman in this alien forest as he had been in Earth's wilderness. The spike wolves had also changed during their time with Tom. They had learned to use tools more sophisticatedly than they ever had before. They had adapted human farming techniques to improve their own food gathering. They had even begun to show interest in concepts like art and music that went beyond their natural behaviors. Tom realized that the relationship between humans and spike wolves was creating something entirely new. Neither species was being dominated or changed against their will. Instead, both species were growing and learning from each other, becoming more than they had been alone. This was not the conquest that most galactic species practiced when they encountered new worlds. This was partnership. This was mutual respect and benefit. This was what Tom hoped the future of human galactic relationships could look like, but Tom also knew that his time of peaceful isolation was coming to an end. The orbital observers had been patient, but they would eventually demand a report. Tom would have to return to explain what he had discovered and to advocate for a completely new approach to this world. When that time came, Tom was determined not to leave his new family behind. The spike wolves had become as important to him as any human friends he had ever had. Glow, Teacher, and the others deserved to have their voices heard in the galactic community. Tom looked around at his thriving settlement, his healthy gardens, and his peaceful Spike Wolf family. He had proven that humans could not only survive in hostile environments, but could build something beautiful and sustainable. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready to learn from his example. The emergency beacon in Tom's pack had been quiet for 6 weeks. He had almost forgotten about the small device until it started beeping one morning as he worked in his garden. The sound was sharp and artificial, completely out of place among the natural sounds of the forest. Several spike wolves looked up with curiosity, their bioluminescent patches flickering in response to the unfamiliar noise. Tom checked the beacon's display. A message from Ambassador Krell appeared in simple text. Council requires immediate report on Verdant 7 mission status. Extraction team departing in 2 days. Prepare for pickup. Glow approached Tom and made a questioning chirp. The young spike wolf had learned to recognize when Tom was reading human messages and knew this usually meant something important was happening. Tom knelt down and gently stroked Glow's smooth head, feeling the warm pulse of the bioluminescent patches under his fingers. Looks like it's time to go talk to the council, Tom said softly. Glow tilted its head, understanding the serious tone even if the words were unclear. Tom had known this moment would come, but he had not expected to feel so conflicted about it. Part of him was excited to share his discoveries with the galactic community. The Spike Wolves deserved recognition as intelligent beings worthy of respect and partnership. The forest's potential as a sustainable colony world needed to be understood properly. But another part of Tom dreaded leaving this place that had become home. The thought of returning to sterile space stations and artificial environments felt wrong after weeks of living in harmony with a natural ecosystem. Worse, he worried about what the Council might decide to do with Verdant 7 once they learned of its value. Tom spent the rest of the day preparing for departure. He gathered samples of the most important plants he had learned to cultivate, carefully preserving them in containers made from natural materials. He documented his settlement's construction techniques using sketches and written notes. Most importantly, he prepared detailed records of Spike Wolf intelligence, culture, and social structures. As evening approached, Tom called together his entire pack family for what might be their last meal together. The gathering was larger than usual. Word had spread through the forest's communication networks that Tom was leaving, and Spike Wolves from neighboring territories had come to say goodbye. Teacher, the elderly Spike Wolf who had taught Tom so much about forest wisdom, approached, with slow, dignified steps. The ancient creature touched Tom's hand with its nose and made a series of complex vocalizations. Tom had learned enough of the Spike Wolf language to understand the basic meaning. Carry our words to the Star People. Help them understand. Other pack members brought gifts for Tom's journey, polished stones that glowed softly in darkness, dried foods that would remain nutritious for long space travel, small carved objects that had personal meaning to their makers. Tom accepted each gift with gratitude, understanding that these were not just souvenirs, but symbols of trust and friendship. Glow and the other 2 young Spike Wolves Tom had rescued stayed close to him throughout the evening. They seemed to sense that something was changing, and their usual playful energy was replaced by quiet attention. When the time came for sleep, all 3 juveniles curled up against Tom, their warm bodies and gentle purring providing comfort for the difficult goodbye that tomorrow would bring. Tom woke before dawn and prepared for the journey to the original landing site where the extraction team would arrive. He packed his essential gear and samples, then faced the hardest decision of his mission. The Council was expecting him to return alone with a report. They were not expecting him to bring alien companions, but Tom looked at Glow and made his choice. The young Spike Wolf had shown intelligence equal to any galactic species. Glow could read and write human symbols, understood complex concepts, and had formed emotional bonds across species lines. If the Council was going to make decisions about Verdant 7 and its inhabitants, they needed to meet one of those inhabitants personally. Want to see the stars? Tom asked Glow. The young spike wolf's bioluminescent patches flared bright with excitement. Glow had always been curious about Tom's descriptions of space travel and other worlds. Tom said goodbye to Teacher and the other adult pack members with promises to return soon. The elderly spike wolf seemed to understand that Tom was taking Glow as an ambassador and approved of the choice. Several adults touched Glow gently, passing on what seemed like final instructions or blessings. The journey to the landing site took most of the morning. Tom moved slowly to accommodate Glow's shorter legs and to give both of them time to adjust to leaving the deep forest. As they walked, Tom explained what they might encounter when they reached the Galactic station. When they arrived at the clearing where Tom had first entered the forest, Glow stopped and stared up at the open sky with wonder. The young spike wolf had never seen so much open space or such a wide view of the horizon. Tom sat with Glow and pointed out landmarks, helping the young creature understand the scale of the world beyond the forest. The extraction shuttle arrived exactly on schedule, descending from orbit with the familiar whine of galactic engines. Tom recognized the pilot as the same nervous Keth who had dropped him off weeks ago. The pilot's 6 arms were busy with instruments as he settled the craft carefully in the clearing. The shuttle door opened and the pilot peered out cautiously. His expression changed from worry to shock when he saw Tom standing healthy and confident in the clearing. It changed to complete amazement when he noticed Glow sitting calmly beside Tom. "Human Rivers?" the pilot called out uncertainly. "You appear to be, well, and you have brought a native predator?" Tom smiled and walked toward the shuttle, with Glow following trustingly at his side. "I'm very well, thank you. And this is Glow. Glow is my friend and a representative of the Spike Wolf people. We're both ready for pickup." The pilot's translator device made several clicking sounds as it processed this information. "My instruments show that creature contains multiple toxin systems that could kill most galactic species. Is it safe?" "Perfectly safe," Tom replied, gently placing his hand on Glow's back. "Spike wolves only use their defensive systems when they feel threatened. Glow trusts me, and I trust Glow." The pilot remained in the shuttle doorway, clearly torn between his orders to extract Tom and his fear of the alien predator. Tom understood the pilot's hesitation, but he also knew that this moment was crucial. If Glow was going to serve as an ambassador, the young spike wolf needed to demonstrate that peaceful contact was possible. Glow seemed to sense the tension in the situation. The young creature approached the shuttle slowly, keeping its spines retracted and its bioluminescent patches glowing in soft, non-threatening colors. When Glow reached the shuttle ramp, the spike wolf sat down and made a gentle chirping sound that Tom had learned was a greeting. The pilot stared at Glow for several long moments. Then, cautiously, he extended one of his 6 hands toward the young spike wolf. Glow sniffed at the offered hand carefully, then touched it gently with the tip of its nose. The pilot's skin did not burn or dissolve. No toxins were released. "Remarkable," the pilot whispered. "It shows intelligent behavior, deliberate communication." Tom smiled as he helped Glow climb into the shuttle. "That's because spike wolves are intelligent. Very intelligent. The Council needs to understand that before they make any decisions about this world." During the flight to the orbital station, Tom prepared Glow for what they would encounter. The young spike wolf was fascinated by the view of Verdant 7 from space, seeing the vast forests and cloud patterns that made up its home world. When other ships came into view near the station, Glow's patches flickered with curiosity rather than fear. The docking bay of the orbital station was crowded with personnel who had come to witness Tom's return. Word had spread that the human who was supposed to die in the toxic forest was coming back alive and apparently healthy. What no one expected was for him to emerge from the shuttle accompanied by one of the deadly predators that had killed so many previous explorers. Ambassador Krell was waiting in the docking bay, along with representatives from a dozen different species. Tom stepped off the shuttle first, carrying his pack of samples and looking better than he had when he left. Behind him, Glow emerged cautiously, staying close to Tom but looking around with obvious intelligence and curiosity. The assembled crowd stepped back nervously as they saw Glow, but Tom's calm confidence and the Spike Wolf's non-threatening behavior kept anyone from panicking. Tom approached Ambassador Krell with Glow walking beside him like a well-trained companion. "Ambassador Krell," Tom said formally, "I present my friend and colleague, Glow of the Verdant 7 Spike Wolf people. Glow has come to speak for their species in any discussions about their homeworld." Ambassador Krell's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed this statement. "You are saying that these creatures are sentient? That they have a civilization?" "Absolutely," Tom replied. "They have complex social structures, oral traditions, sustainable agriculture, and sophisticated engineering techniques. They've been managing their ecosystem for generations. This world isn't an empty planet with dangerous wildlife. It's an inhabited world with intelligent natives who have every right to participate in decisions about their future." Glow stepped forward and made a series of vocalizations that Tom had taught the young Spike Wolf for this moment. The sounds were clearly structured and purposeful, obviously language rather than random animal noises. Then Glow did something that stunned everyone present. Using a piece of metal flooring as a writing surface and a claw as a stylus, Glow carefully scratched out letters in Galactic Standard, "Hello, Council friends." The silence in the docking bay was complete. Every being present understood the implications of what they had just witnessed. This was not just an intelligent species. This was an intelligent species that could learn other languages and adapt to other cultures. Ambassador Krell was the first to speak. "Human Rivers, your mission was to evaluate Verdant 7 for resource extraction. You have instead discovered a sentient species and apparently formed an alliance with them." Tom nodded. "I've discovered that Verdant 7 can provide everything the galaxy needs, but only if we work with its inhabitants instead of displacing them. The Spike Wolves have techniques for sustainable resource management that put our methods to shame. They can teach us how to harvest what we need without destroying the ecosystem." Tom opened his pack and began displaying his samples. Preserved foods that were more nutritious than anything in the galactic database. Fibers that were stronger than manufactured materials. Medicines derived from plants that grew naturally in the forest. Construction materials that were both durable and completely biodegradable. "This world can feed entire systems and provide materials for countless colonies," Tom continued. "But only if we approach it as partners with the Spike Wolves, not as conquerors." Glow had been watching the crowd of assembled beings with fascination. The young Spike Wolf approached the Drakmor representative who had spoken so dismissively of Tom's chances during the original briefing. The massive warrior tensed as Glow approached, but the Spike Wolf simply sat down and looked up at the towering figure with curiosity. After a moment of consideration, Glow made a sound that was clearly meant as a greeting. The Drakmor warrior looked down at the small creature that showed no fear of his intimidating size and bulk. Slowly, carefully, the warrior knelt down to bring himself closer to Glow's level. "You show respect," the Drakmor said in his booming voice. "That is the mark of intelligence." Glow tilted its head and made an inquiring sound. Tom translated, "Glow is asking if you would like to learn some Spike Wolf greetings. It's considered polite among their people to share cultural exchanges." What followed was a scene that would be remembered in galactic history. The fierce Drakmor, warrior whose people had conquered half a dozen star systems through military might, sitting cross-legged on a docking bay floor while a young alien predator taught him proper greeting gestures. Other species representatives began approaching cautiously, drawn by curiosity and the obvious intelligence Glow displayed. The young spike wolf greeted each new being with patience and interest, adapting its communication style to what worked best for each species. Ambassador Krell watched these interactions with growing amazement. Human Rivers, how long did it take you to establish communication with this individual? About 10 minutes, Tom replied. Spike wolves are natural communicators. They're also natural teachers and learners. Glow picked up basic galactic standard in less than 2 weeks. The implications of this statement rippled through the assembled crowd. A species that could learn new languages in weeks could integrate into galactic society faster than any previous first contact. A species that was naturally inclined to teach and learn could become valuable partners rather than subjects to be studied. Tom looked around at the faces of the various species representatives and saw understanding beginning to dawn. This was not going to be a typical planetary resource extraction. This was going to be the galaxy's first true partnership with a newly discovered intelligent species. I recommend that the Council begin formal diplomatic relations with the Spike Wolf people immediately, Tom continued. I also recommend that any development of Verdant 7 be done in full consultation with its inhabitants. They know their world better than we ever could, and they have much to teach us about sustainable living. Glow had tired of meeting new people and returned to Tom's side. The young Spike Wolf's bioluminescent patches were glowing brightly with excitement. But Tom could see that the strange environment and crowd of alien beings was becoming overwhelming. Tom knelt down and scratched behind Glow's tiny spines, providing comfort and reassurance. We should probably get Glow settled somewhere quiet, Tom said. This is all very new and exciting, but Spike Wolves need regular rest periods. Ambassador, Krell nodded. Of course. We will prepare suitable accommodations. But first, Human Rivers. The Council requires a full debriefing. Your mission has exceeded all expectations and created possibilities we never considered. Tom stood up and adjusted his pack. I'll provide whatever information the Council needs. But remember, any decisions about Verdant 7 should include Glow and other Spike Wolf representatives. They're not just intelligent, they're wise. The galaxy could learn a lot from them. As Tom and Glow were escorted toward the station's interior, Tom reflected on how much had changed since his first day in the forest. He had gone to Verdant 7 as humanity's representative to the galaxy. He was returning as an ambassador for an entirely new kind of relationship between species. The future was full of possibilities that no one had imagined when this mission began. Tom looked down at Glow, who was walking beside him with perfect trust, and smiled. Whatever came next, humans and Spike Wolves would face it together.